Hey, it's me, Nalthazar, and welcome to another video. This is going to be my rare chase card video for M21. You'll have to forgive the general look. It was Pokemon Go Fest this past weekend, and I went full ragamuffin. So, yeah, I definitely need, shave and all that good stuff. But nonetheless, I wanted to make sure that I got this to you in time for the M21 release. So, let's get going. The first card on my list is Alpine Houndmaster. It's 9 for a 4/4 with Bravery, and when this creature enters the battlefield, fetch the first two different dog creature cards from your library. When this creature attacks, this creature and your dog creatures get +2/+0 until end of turn for each of their reinforcements. So this card is really cool for a number of reasons. One, it fetches two creatures from your library. I really like that. And it fetches two different creatures from your library, which I also like. So with this and two other creatures, you get all three of your creatures just by playing this one. Granted, the other two go to your hand, not the battlefield. If you didn't know, all of the creatures that are hounds are being errated to dog. So things like Underworld Cerberus and whatnot, those are all going to become dogs. So they will be benefiting from this card. Now, if we get some really strong dog token generators, then this thing is going to be even better because it gives all of the dog and dog creatures +2/+0 until end of turn for each of their reinforcements. So this card could have the opportunity to get a lot better with time. We'll just need to see what else comes out. Backdraft Kite is more of a good card for newer players, but I'm putting this also on here just in case because they've mentioned, they being Octagon, they've mentioned that they're going to be reworking Buried a little bit, and so this card could become really powerful with that. It's 15 for a 6/6 flyer, and when this creature attacks, the first spell in your graveyard without Buried gains Flashback and Buried X. X is that card's base mana cost, which basically just means that as you activate graveyard gems, you're going to be able to replay things from your graveyard. And then at the beginning of your turn, if you raided, meaning that if you attacked on your previous turn, create up to 3 graveyard gems. So there's a whole bunch of things in the game now that will make graveyard gems during each of your turns. So Backdraft Hellkite will make 3. There's going to be a new Liliana Vanguard, I want to say, and that one's going to make 3. We've got the Lamia from Theros Beyond Death that makes 3. So there's a whole bunch of different things that are going to make 3. Which means that you could maybe cast all those spells, again, basically for free. Which brings us to Basrys Lieutenant. Basrys Lieutenant is a 5/6 Vigilant for 14. At the beginning of each player's turn, so your turn and your opponent's, if your opponent controls a multicolored creature, this creature gains protection from that creature's colors until end of turn. It also has, when this creature enters the battlefield, target creature you control gets +2/+2, and when a creature you control dies or loses a reinforcement, if that creature was buffed, create a night token. Now, because of the target creature you control gets +2/+2 part of it, you could kind of just call this 14 for 7/8 with Vigilance, which really isn't that bad. And then that it gains protection from multicolored creatures' colors means that you're probably going to get protection from many of your opponent's planeswalkers' colors with this thing out. Which means that as a defender, it's going to be immune to your opponent's removal, and then it's probably going to kill your opponent's creatures by blocking them. So for newer players, this card could be very useful to have in your collection. For people with more complete collections, I don't see this putting in quite as much work, but it's still definitely a pretty good card. Burlfist Oak. This card is actually potentially really strong. It's kind of like a poor man's version of a bunch of different cards. So it's 10 for a 5/4 with Trample, which is already okay. And then when you draw a card, this creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Now there's so many ways to draw cards in Puzzle Quest that you could really easily buff this card up a ton of times, which means that this is really good for players, once again, with less complete collections. But even if you have a more complete collection, if you're using stuff like Song of Creation or Days Undoing or just other kinds of things like that, you can easily be drawing yourself, somewhere in the realm of like 10 cards a turn, maybe more, and that means that this thing's getting +20/+20 until end of turn. So this is just a small critter that you can buff up really high, and especially since Prowess is a new mechanic and is a very strong new mechanic, at least seemingly, this will benefit very much from that. Chandras Incinerator looks like an absolute boss. It's 20 for an 8/8, and when you deal non-combat damage to your opponent's planeswalker, so that means that if a creature you control deals damage directly to your opponent's planeswalker, or if like you cast a spell, for example, so Electro Dominance, or if you have a support that just directly burns your opponent, or if you use a planeswalker ability to burn your opponent, all of those things count. Then if this card's in your hand, reduce its cost by X until the end of turn, where X is the damage dealt this way. Meaning that if you're using like Chandra Awakened Inferno, or if you're using Bolas 2, I mean, there are other options, but those are the two that really come to mind first to me. Then you're going to be able to play this card for really next to no mana by using their abilities that burn for damage. And then on top of that, it has, when you deal non-combat damage to your opponent's planeswalker, deal X damage to target opposing creature. Which means that when you now start burning your opponent with crazy stuff, this thing is also going to start destroying your opponent's creatures, meaning that you can just start freely going and burning your opponent. So given all of the good crazy goodness with red that's come out, like Fiery Emancipation, which is going to make it so that whenever you cast a spell, you burn your opponent based on its converted mana cost, which means that now this thing is also going to be dealing damage to your opponent's creatures equal to the spell's converted mana cost. You see what I'm saying? You're going to be able to get a lot of damage going. This is an absolute chase card. Like this is a must-have card. This is going to be really strong. Trust me, really strong. Conspicuous Snoop. I want to start by saying I was actually right in my masterpiece video about big hulking goblin, that I was wrong in the text that I put next to it saying that I was wrong, but it's actually right. So basically, Conspicuous Snoop makes it so that at the beginning of your turn, you fetch the first goblin card from your library. And then at the beginning of combat, if the last card in your hand is a goblin, you exile the Conspicuous Snoop that's on the battlefield, and you put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of that last goblin in your hand. That token gains haste, and then at end of turn, you exile said token and return Conspicuous Snoop back to the battlefield again. Which means that if you use this with said big Masterpiece Goblin Bruiser, you are indeed going to be getting a big Masterpiece Goblin Bruiser every turn, which means that if you're running it with Koth, you're going to be getting at least 9 little goblin tokens along with it. So yeah, Conspicuous Snoop is going to be really cool with that. It's also really nice for all of the different objectives where you need to cast X or more creatures with a certain mana cost, or you need to cast or summon X or more goblins. This is going to be a really good card for that. Curse of Fool's Wisdom. I feel like every set there's a card that I look at and I go, Ob Nixilis is going to absolutely love this card. And as I really like Ob Nixilis, I really like this card. So Curse of Fool's Wisdom is a support. It's got like the little eternal support thingy, right? So if you match it, it doesn't lose shields, which definitely helps given that it only has 2 shields. It has Madness, which could be nice potentially. And then when your opponent draws a card, your opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. And when your opponent activates a loyalty ability, your opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. So this basically just fits hand in hand with what you're looking to accomplish with Ob Nixilis anyways. And then on top of that, it gives you some life gain in black, which is going to be really nice because black's life gain is somewhat limited. So definitely a card that Ob Nixilis is going to like. Demonic Embrace is a card that is a chase card to me as long as Ravnica is in, because this means that if you pair this with, I want to say it's Rakdos the Defiler, then you can make any one of your other creatures a demon subtype, which means that now Rakdos, when Rakdos does his dirty things of attacking your opponent, dealing damage, and destroying all non-demon creatures, now all of your other creatures are going to be able to survive that horrendous onslaught. And so you're going to be able to have a more flexible deck around Rakdos instead of just playing like Rakdos, and something like Villas or, whatever. This also has at the beginning of your turn, if this card is in your graveyard, you may lose 13 life and discard the last card in your hand. If you do, this card gains full mana, which just means that you can keep playing this. If you've got stuff that gives you lifelink, then this will be nice to be able to just play repeatedly, kind of, just because it's going to be repeatedly buffing things. So you could make things get pretty big with that. Fierce Empath just follows my absolute love of fetching things from your library, namely creatures, and giving them mana. So when this creature enters the battlefield, you pick one of the first 4 creature cards with base converted mana cost of 18 or more, fetch it, and give it 9 mana. If you got Ferocious, so you have a creature on the battlefield with a base power of 5 or greater, then this creature gets +2/+2. So you're probably going to get that with the creature that you fetch. Maybe not, but nonetheless, it's just a little guy that's going to go ahead and fetch you more of your creatures, give them mana, so you'll be able to accelerate your deck. Followed Footsteps is definitely a really cool card. It's a card you're going to want to get your hands on. Target creature you control gains enchanted. At the beginning of your turn, reinforce this creature, which means that it's going to just buff your creatures up to such an incredible extent so quickly that it's going to be super nasty. Imagine putting this on, say, like Quartzwood Crasher, so that the Quartzwood is reinforcing every turn. Or you put it on like the 7 Dwarves or whatever that little mining dwarf is, and now because that thing gets extra powers when it gets reinforced, more goodness happens. I would imagine that we're going to have more cards that are also going to at some point do something based on their number of reinforcements, and so this is kind of like Hydra's Growth, but better. And it's blue, which means that blue-green, you can run both Hydra's Growth and this on the same creature and laugh out loud as horrible things happen to your opponent. Think of putting both of them on, say, I don't know, Gaia's Revenge. Yeah, that's terrifying. That's a 2-turn kill. Indrik Umbra. Target creature you control gets +6/+6 and gains Berserker and First Strike. Then that creature gains Enchanted. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield under your control with its reinforcements. Then it loses all its buffs and enchanted effects. So basically, you put this on a creature, not only does it become super big and nasty, and it starts killing off your opponent's creatures, and if they don't have creatures, it just whaps them really hard in the face. But then when your opponent finally gets around to removing the thing that you put this darn thing on, it just comes right back with all of its reinforcements, which is super sweet. This card looks really, really strong to me, especially paired with the new blindfolded dude of rawr, destroy your opponent's supports and creatures. Very good card. Yeah, you want this. Kinetic Auger. So Kinetic Auger reminds me a lot of, oh geez, what's that Drake called? It was a blue-red Drake. It was an uncommon. So this thing is an 11 mana 1/1 with trample. When you cast this card, you may discard the last 2 cards from your hand, and if you do, draw 2 cards. And then the really important piece is when this creature enters the battlefield, it gets +X/+X, where X is the number of spell cards in your graveyard. That +X/+X is permanent. It is really easy to get a ton of spells into your graveyard. I was really excited for Riel because she gained power based on the number of spells in your graveyard. This is just like that, right? Except like this gets it for every single copy of this that you put down. So yeah, this thing has a lot more potential to be super, super nasty and bad. But you could also put it with Riel and then run a deck that's milling a bunch of stuff, or you lean heavily on Rawl's first ability, or, I mean, so many different possibilities, right? You use Fenax with them, and yeah, I mean, although their base power toughness is not very high for Fenax, but you get the idea. There's a lot of things that you can do to put a bunch of things in your graveyard. You can make Kinetic Auger become very powerful very quickly. So this is a way for people with either super big collections to maybe get a creature into the thousands of power, or people with smaller collections to get a really powerful creature and be like, yeah, I'm doing so much damage, which is always fun. Leafkin Avenger. See, this is a card that I really want because I have a thing for green and I have a thing for gem conversion. But this is 12 for a 6/5. It's got activate 3 green, convert 1 gem to green for each creature you control with base power 5 or more. And when you convert 3 or more gems to green, deal X damage to your opponent's planeswalker, where X is this creature's power. So if you've got like a bunch of supports that convert 3, think things like, I want to say it's like Lotus Bloom, or maybe I'm thinking of the wrong Lotus because there are 2 Lotuses in Standard right now, but I think it's Lotus Bloom that exiles one of your, or destroys one of your lands. But you've got that, you got Gemstone Cavern, you've got Nissa Worldwaker's first ability, you've got Eidolon of Blossoms, you've got so many different things that are going to convert 3 gems to green, and every time you do that, this thing is going to deal X damage to your opponent's planeswalker, where X is its power. This isn't capped by anything, so if you say put this in conjunction with Eidolon of Blossoms in an enchantment deck that converts gems, you could just totally burn out your opponent in one turn by playing all of those beautiful, wonderful things. And then let's say that you're also running Xenagos and Nyxbloom Ancient in the deck too. Then Xenagos you can use to double this thing's power during the combat phase, and then when Nyxbloom Ancient hits the opponent, and you're playing a green deck, so you get all of the gems converted to green, then this thing is going to go ahead and pop off again and do crazy damage to your opponent. I see this being an absolutely amazing card. For me personally, this card is a must-have just because I adore green and conversion, and this is everything that I want from a card that would otherwise benefit from green conversion, especially like green-red. So yeah, this could be a really cool, really strong card. Pack Leader is 10 for a 4/4. It's got Bravery. While on the battlefield, your dog creatures get +2/+2. When this creature attacks, your dog creatures get +2/+0 and gain first strike. Let's pretend for a moment that this is the only dog in your deck. This is still an 8/4 first strike, an 8/6 first strike for 10 mana. That's really good for newer players, guys. That's really, really good for newer players. For those of you that are not newer to the game, this is going to be like it'll still be strong, but it won't be like, oh my gosh, I got this thing, I'm going to win the game, right? For lower level planeswalkers, when you first start out, you don't have the runes to max out all your walkers. Pack Leader is going to lead you to a lot of wins. Very strong. Primal Mate. I really like this card, not just because it appears to have Galta in the art, but, you know, dinosaurs are awesome. But even more than that, it's a really cool card. So it's 4 mana, it's got a stored mana of 10, and your first creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, so that's up to +10/+10. Then that creature fights target opposing creature, where X is this card's stored mana. Now this is going to be really good with Zathras or Zagrum or Zaxara or names that start with X. The stored mana Hydra dude that makes a stored mana Hydra token that does stored mana boom booms to your opponent, but not really stored mana boom booms apart from it hitting them, and so we'll go ahead and call that boom booms, right? But Primal Mate's going to go really well in there because it's going to serve as extra removal, and then on top of that, it's also going to make things bigger. So you play this, and now you should be getting a Hydra token that, let's say that you put this on the Hydra token, you're getting like 20 extra power that turn just for playing this, and you're removing a creature, so that's just win, win, win. Shipwreck Dowser. So this card has prowess, which kind of just makes it good on its own, but then it has something that benefits the prowess, that makes a prowess even better. So it's 12 for a 5/5 unblockable. Prowess, whenever you play a non-creature card, this creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn, or whenever you cast, excuse me. And then when this creature enters the battlefield, pick one of the first 4 spell cards from your graveyard, fetch it, and give it half of its mana. So it's going to replace itself in your hand, it's going to replace itself in your hand with a spell, and it's going to give that spell some mana. And whenever you play a spell, this thing is going to get more powerful, which means that if you make some kind of horrible green-blue loop deck, which would not surprise me at all, this thing is going to be an absolute must-have for those of you that don't have like all of the masterpiece versions of this card. So this card looks like it'll be very, very strong. I see myself using it quite a bit in the early going, and even maybe once I figure out the set, I'll still use it because prowess really looks that strong to me. Like, really, really strong to me. Solemn Simulacrum, I need to play with and test to see if I like it, but it definitely seems cool. So it's 12 for a 4/4 with Defender, and when this creature enters the battlefield, convert 4 gems to loyalty gems. So it's going to give you, ideally, a bunch of loyalty. And then when this creature dies, draw a card, it gains mana equal to the amount of loyalty you have. So this thing comes in, it'll probably block something because it's got Defender, it'll probably die because it's only got 4 toughness, and then you get to draw a card and ideally gain a ton of mana. If you play this card with something like Liliana Death's Majesty, or if you play it with the new M21 Liliana, there are going to be ways for you to have this thing come out, die, give you a bunch of card draw with loyalty, and a whole bunch of other goodness. The downside to new Liliana is that you do have to use your 3rd, so that's going to cap the amount of loyalty that you have. And the downside to Death's Majesty is, of course, that you have to still use a loyalty ability to make that happen. On the plus side for Death's Majesty, that first ability doesn't cost a lot, and when this thing enters the battlefield, you're converting gems to loyalty gems. So if you use other loyalty gem converters, you should very reasonably be able to just repeat and use that first ability every turn to draw crazy amounts of cards, give them crazy amounts of mana, and do some really fun things. If it works out, expect me to make a video on that, because really that's something that I think would be really fun. Teferi's Ageless Insight. This card is a bit wacky, guys. So it's 14 for a support enchantment with 3 shields. It's legendary, and when you draw the first card on your turn or another effect makes you draw a card, you draw a card and give that card 3 mana. So basically, anytime you draw a card to anything but Teferi's Ageless Insight, draw a card and give that card 3 mana. That's the simplest way of putting it. And on top of that, this thing also gives your first creature prowess, or not actually. It actually has prowess itself, meaning that if your first creature already has prowess, the 2 prowess abilities should stack. So it gives it an extra prowess ability to give your first creature +2/+2 until end of turn when you cast a non-creature spell. I've already said a few times what I think of prowess, so not only does this give you bonus card draw every single turn guaranteed, kind of like Alhammarret's Archive, and it gives those cards mana, but it's also going to boost up the power of your creatures when you play stuff. So I really like this card. It looks pretty darn cool to me. Which brings us to the last card on my list. It's Warstorm Surge. Warstorm Surge is 14 for a support with 4 shields. And when a token creature you control enters the battlefield, it deals damage equal to its power to your opponent's planeswalker. This effect can trigger up to 4 times per turn. Quartzwood Crasher, I'm looking at you. Quartzwood Crasher with double strike, I'm especially looking at you. This is going to be absolutely bananas with Quartzwood Crasher. There are other things that this will still be good with. You could play it in other forms of token decks, but really Quartzwood Crasher is what I am looking at. You could also run this in a red-white Divine Visitation deck where you're getting out a whole bunch of angel tokens that are going to do naughty things. But nonetheless, this card still looks pretty cool to me in that it can do a whole bunch of damage, like a whole bunch of damage with tokens, and tokens are really strong in Puzzle Quest. So I apologize a little bit for the background whirring sound. That's my fan. It's on overdrive today. But thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what rares you're excited for, and I'll see you in the next one.